Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So I've posted a couple sample literary analyses for you, and I wanted to talk through one example just to show you how it might inform your own essay and some of the ways that our assignment is just a little bit different than the sample that you see here. So you'll go to week 14 and you'll see a couple of sample readings. These are in Cengage. You click that and then you'll click on this tab here. You should see this sample paper that looks like this. And I think this is a solid draft. This sample paper analyzes the symbolism in a short story like you might be doing. It's analyzing a classic short story by Ernest Hemingway. And you can see here that the writer begins by carefully introducing the short story, but sort of assumes that either the audience has access to the story or may have read it already. So there's no need to kind of explain the entire plot in detail. So that's kind of your rhetorical situation too. Imagine that you're writing to other young scholars, perhaps in our area, perhaps somewhere else, who would have access to this story that you're talking about. And so you don't need to tell them everything about it. Although, as you can see, some kind of summary, some discussion of elements of the story will be necessary. As we've talked about, there are many ways to start your essays and connect with your audience. And of course, the literary analysis essay is no exception. You could start with an interesting historical fact. You could start with common knowledge or common scenarios that are related to both your audience's understanding of the world and the story itself. You could talk about something else related thematically to the story, something about the effect that the story has on the reader. Any of those things could work. Perhaps personal anecdotes could work as well if there's some kind of connection there. Though generally a literary analysis is written in third person. And here this writer starts talking about the effect of the story. Ernest Hemingway gives the reader the power to decide how the story plays out, kind of this undecidedness with the symbolism here. But this technique, the effect of the story, allows this student writer to start talking about the nature of symbolism, because symbolism obviously is the focus of the thesis statement. So you can see here how very carefully the writer eases into the discussion of symbolism. And here's the thesis statement right at the beginning. The setting in the story holds deep symbolic meaning that pertains to the two main characters and helps highlight their choices and consequences. All right, so this is a really clear, straightforward thesis statement about the symbolic meaning of the piece. And yours could be something like this, right? You could talk about, the symbolism of a particular character, a particular conversation, a thing or an object or a moment in the story. That's all fair game. You could also talk about another way that the overall meaning plays out in the story. Maybe the meaning is about history or about psychology or about ethics or about the nature of the way people recognize each other, or about something else related to society. There could be many different things, right, that we've talked about. But you want to make sure that your thesis statement is interpretive, that you're trying to bring out what the story means, paying attention to kind of the historical embeddedness of the story, that it's not something that just is floating out, nowhere without any kind of connection to time or place, right? As we've said, Kafka's story was not about the internet. This Hemingway story, is not about events in 2022, right? It's not about, cryptocurrency, right? There's no, that would be an absurd thing to say, right? Because that wasn't something that was being discussed then. Make sure your thesis statement is responsible to the history of the story as well as the internal logic of the story and the different features that it shows. So moving along here, you can see how the writer alludes to specific events of the story without spending a whole lot of time on summary itself. The short story opens with a paragraph rich with imagery. So this kind of addresses a reader who may or may not have read the story, but could easily get a hold of the story and read the whole thing if they want to, right? But the specific observations here really pertain back to that thesis statement of, related to symbolism. By comparing the hills to white elephants, this character is hinting these things, right? And then there's the use of a quote here. So here you have a clear claim and then evidence from the story itself. And so at certain points, you're going to want to use specific evidence. And this is a great example of doing that. So you want to, at least paraphrase and quote from the story that you're working with. So at least a couple of quotes, are going to be important, just to show your audience that you've paid attention to the specific language of the story. And as we saw with our discussion of the Louise Erdrich story, sometimes the specific language really matters a lot, right? So there's some close reading here. The writer here moves on to another piece of symbolism that is related to the major theme, and then there's another discussion of the theme. So you can really see the whole outline of the paper here. It would be very easy to kind of backwards engineer this student paper to kind of show the relationship between the thesis and the main claims and the use of evidence here. And so your essay doesn't have to look exactly like this. There may, your thesis statement may well be much more sophisticated than this. It, may be dealing with deeper issues. And of course, you're going to want to bring in your one outside source, which this doesn't have. So your works cited should look like this, but you should have the original story like this, and then your one outside source. There could be more sources if you want to, but that is optional. So take a look at this, read it through it carefully, because I think this could give you an idea of how to plan a structure and how to go about writing this essay. There's also another example that I've included for you as well. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions about this essay or want me to look at a section of it or the whole thing, please send it along. Thank you.